Well, it's not quite a pure historical, but I'll take it. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. You know how much I love the pure historicals. They were a staple of the First Doctor era, and I love every single one of them. I count Marco Polo as one of my all-time favorite stories in Doctor Who history, and other great ones like the Crusades and the Romans and all of those. They really stand out for me, and on my first watch through, dramatically lifted my opinion of the First Doctor. Unfortunately, with the advent of the Second Doctor, the notion of the pure historicals pretty much went away. There was the Highlanders, which introduced Jamie McCrimmon as a companion, and that was pretty much it until the last Fifth Doctor 2-episode story, Black Orchid, which is a great period piece in early 20th century England. Black Orchid also, as I mentioned at the time I watched it, is, in terms of viewership, the highest rated story of the Peter Davison era. It's kind of interesting then that this is a near mirror image. The next two-part story to happen is this one, The King's Demons, and it is, in terms of viewership, the lowest rated story of the Fifth Doctor era. And for the first half of its runtime, it appears to be a pure historical. The Doctor and Tegan and Turlough arrive in England in the year 1215, and specifically in the location of a castle that is presently hosting King John himself, a mere 3 months prior to the signing of the Magna Carta. This is a pivotal moment in English history, and this is a classic, pure historical Doctor Who setup. This would have been perfectly at home in the First Doctor era, until the cliffhanger at the end of Part 1, which reveals the Master as being behind the things that are going on, and confirms that the King John appearing in this story is an imposter. The real King John is already in London, knighting his followers and having them sign their oath of the Crusade, ready to embark on that journey. And so it turns out the Master's entire plot is to thwart the signing of the Magna Carta and to alter history and prevent the establishment of parliamentary democracy. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because it sounds very much like the plot of the original renegade rival Time Lord, the Meddling Monk. And there are some rumors where people theorize that originally the character in the story was supposed to be the monk, and that appears not to be the case. There was no point during the stage of writing where the rival was not the Master. And it would have been an interesting return of an old villain, but at this point, that villain was long forgotten by most Doctor Who fans, and the actor who played him had tragically passed away 3 or 4 years previous. Although, being a Time Lord, it would have been easy enough to have him regenerate. But in any case, here we have the Master, who, in my opinion, appears far too much in this era. He is the Daleks of this era. But more interestingly, the imposter King John turns out to actually be the robot Kamelion, who was somehow instrumental in the Master's escape from Zerafas after the events of Time Flight. And in the end, Kamelion becomes the first non-human companion of the Doctor since K9 left. And make no mistake, Kamelion was intended to be a regular traveling companion. The idea of Kamelion was pitched by a programmer and an engineer who built this sound-activated robot and promised that he could be a vibrant, lifelike member of the crew, and gave him the ability to magically transform into any other character so that he could be played by human actors in pivotal scenes. But certainly the intention was for Kamelion to be a series regular for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, much like K9, but far worse, the Kamelion robot malfunctioned horribly during filming. He was a nightmare to use, and he winds up only being used very sparingly in The King's Demons. He basically appears in 2 locations and barely moves in either one. And so, it's no great mystery that after this grand introduction of a new companion at the very end of the season, Kamelion is effectively never heard from again. He will eventually show up towards the end of the next season in Planet of Fire, and that is Kamelion's entire journey with the TARDIS crew. He apparently spends the entirety of the next season just kind of wandering around the inside of the TARDIS and doing his own thing. You go, Kamelion. You were 30 years ahead of your time, and if you were attempted today, they'd be using Boston Dynamics to build the character, and it would be phenomenal. Which, hey, Chris Chibnall, why don't you give Boston Dynamics a call? And on that note, I'm going to call it a day. Tomorrow, Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. It's the last day of 2020, and purely by coincidence, tomorrow lines up to be the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, and I could not be more excited. I'll see you then.